Why Pioneer Day, July 24th? In Utah, that's a holiday, and as a member of the church, in other places outside of Utah, they celebrate Pioneer Day. What's with that? I'm not a pioneer in Utah. I don't have ancestors that went to the Great Salt Lake. What is with that? I'm going to talk about why we celebrate July 24th. And my approach is going to be how discuss how some of the historical events of the early church pioneers is fulfillment of prophecy. At the end of the presentation, I'll mention a couple of other links by talk by Russell M. Nelson and Hugh Nibley, who gave different and very interesting points on why we celebrate July 24th. The approach I'm going to take is fulfillment of prophecy, then talk about how we're blessed by this, how I was blessed by this, and then what? Just a reminder, Angel Moroni appeared to Joseph Smith in September at his father's home, and that's the ongoing restoration of the gospel. And the angel Moroni told him that he quoted Elijah in saying that he will plant in the hearts of children the promises made to the fathers, and the hearts of the children shall turn to their fathers. And those promises are prophecies, and there were promises made to the house of Israel in the Bible, Book of Mormon, and re-revealed in the Doctrine and Covenants and the Pearl of Great Price. James E. Faust said, "Brothers and sisters, ours is the time of which the prophet Joseph Smith spoke, quote, upon which prophets, priests, and kings in ages past have dwelt with peculiar delight, and have looked forward with joyful anticipation to the day in which we live, and fired with heavenly and joyful anticipation they have sung, written, and prophesied of this our day. We are the favored people that God hath chosen to bring about the latter day glory." End of quote. In Jeremiah chapter 31, LeGrand Richards, a member of the Quorum of the 12, in the book A Marvelous Work and a Wonder, said, "Properly understood, the prophet Jeremiah here wrote a portion of the history of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, approximately 2,500 years before it occurred, and while but briefly stated, it is very accurate." And so here are the verses I'm going to talk about, and this will be in the PDF link, and you can get to it and read it and follow along. In Jeremiah chapter 31, verse 7 through 8, "For thus saith the Lord, sing with gladness for Jacob, and shout among the chief of the nation. Publish ye, praise ye, and say, O Lord, save thy people, the remnant of Israel. Behold, I will bring them from the north country, and gather them from the coast of the earth, and with them the blind, and the lame, and the woman with child, and her that travaileth with child together, and a great company shall return thither." And so there's some stories in church history where Brigham Young and Heber C. Kimball, on their way to England, looked back and shouted, "Hooray, hurrah for Israel," and shout among the chief of the nation. And this is Dan Jones in Wales preaching the gospel. And among the chief of the nations, here's a plot of the birth of the members from 1830 to 1848. Many of the members were from England, among the coast of the nation, and among the chiefs of the nation, and also from parts of the U.S. and Canada, and you had converts from Norway and Sweden and Germany, from the north countries. In verse 8, it also says that a woman with child and her that travaileth with child together, a great company shall return thither. And here's a picture of Mary Fielding Smith and her son Joseph S. Smith. They struggled. Joseph Smith was the son of Hiram Smith, who was martyred along with the prophet Joseph Smith in Carthage. And here's a quote from an Ensign article. "Many had to bear and bury children along the trail. Eliza R. Snow says that on the first evening of the journey, this was just on the way out of Nauvoo, 9 children were born. She also recalled the later birth that happened during a rainstorm in a crude tent. Several sisters held dishes to catch raindrops with in order to keep the mother and her infant dry. Lena D.H. Young, wife of Brigham Young, gave birth in the back of a covered wagon. She halted the march of the company when it happened. Though the birthing conditions were far from ideal, these mothers carried on. Zena said, I did not mind the hardships of my situation, for my life had been preserved, and my babes seemed so beautiful. Also in verse 8 it says, And a great company shall return thither. Thither is afar off from where Jeremiah was prophesying, not here or hither, a new land promised to Joseph, sold in Egypt, and his descendants in Genesis and Deuteronomy. And here's a photo of George Edward Anderson's in 1897 50-year reunion of the surviving Mormon pioneers who entered Salt Lake Valley on July 24th, 1847, in a great company. In verse 9 it says, They shall come with weeping, and with supplications will I lead them. I will cause them to walk by the rivers of waters in a straight way, wherein they shall not stumble. For I am a father to Israel, and Ephraim is my firstborn. They were able to cross over on the Mississippi River froze overnight, and they were able to cross over when they were forced to leave Nauvoo, Illinois. Here's a statue of a couple in Winter Quarters, Nebraska. And Winter Quarters was the Valley Forge of Mormonism. They come with weeping and with supplication. The Morton Handcart companies were many of the that died out on the plains. And then there was the rescue. They shall come with weeping, and supplications will I lead them. I will cause them to walk by the rivers of waters in a straight way, wherein they shall not stumble. And here is a map of the North Platte River. You can see the Mississippi River and then the North Platte River. And in their trek from Nauvoo and from Winter Quarters to the Salt Lake, they traveled along the North Platte River for about 600 miles along, and as Jeremiah had seen. And here's a picture of the wagon trails. And then in verse 10, it says, Hear the word of the Lord, O ye nations, and declare it in the isles afar off, and say, He that scattered Israel will gather him, and keep him as a shepherd doth his flock. In John chapter 16, the Savior taught, And other sheep I have, which are not of this fold, them also I must bring, and they shall hear my voice, and there shall be one fold and one shepherd. The Bible is a record of God's dealings in the Old World, whereas the Book of Mormon is a record of God dealing in the New World, and it also has an account of the Good Shepherd's visit, even Jesus Christ. And there'll be one fold and one shepherd. And the Book of Mormon is part of the gathering of Israel. Then in verse 11 it says, For the Lord hath redeemed Jacob, and ransomed him from the hand of him that was stronger than he. Joseph Smith taught, what was the object of gathering the people of God in any age of the world? The main object was to build unto the Lord a house whereby he could reveal unto his people the ordinances of his house and the glories of his kingdom, and teach the people the way of salvation. For it is the same purpose that God gathered together his people in the last days, to build unto the Lord a house, to prepare them for the ordinances and endowments, washings and anointings. That's part of the redemption of Jacob. And then in verse 11 it says, For the Lord hath redeemed Jacob, and ransomed him from the hand of him that was stronger than he. And so here in Winter Quarters, the United States, at that time, the United States was engaged in a Mexican-American war, a battle for land that was then Mexican territory. Concerned that about thousands of saints heading into enemy territory, President Polk ordered the U.S. Army official to recruit a few hundred saints to enlist in the Army. President Polk said he hoped to conciliate the Mormons, attach them to our country, and prevent them from taking part against us. Why did 500 volunteers agree to join the Army? They joined because they listened to President Brigham Young, a living prophet. Captain Allen never would have been able to persuade them to enlist. But President Young knew that their service would provide funds to help the Saints reach the Salt Lake Valley, allowing them to gather as a covenant people with trust in the Lord and a prophet. Volunteers prepared to march with the U.S. Army. And so this is a map showing their march across the southern southwestern part of the United States. And they were discharged in San Diego. And some of the Saints went this way, and some of the Mormon battalion went north up to Sutter's Fort and then over, and they were working their way back. In Jeremiah verse 12 it says, "Therefore they shall come and sing in the height of Zion, and shall flow together to the goodness of the Lord for wheat and for wine and for oil and for the young of the flock and of the herd. And their souls shall be as a watered garden, and they shall not sorrow any more at all." And what's amazing is they had the ability to grow wheat, uh, dry farms in Utah and Idaho, and it's as good as some of the most prosperous land in the Midwest. Also, there's oil field and gas field, green being oil field, red being gas field in the Rocky Mountain region. And for the chief things, in Deuteronomy verse 15, for the chief things of the ancient mountains and for the precious things of the lasting hills. And here's a picture of the Mormon battalion members that were discharged, working their way back to the Salt Lake Valley at Sutter's Mill. They discovered the gold there, but rather than stay, they continued on back to the Salt Lake Valley. And here's a stamp of the gold rush, and that led to the gold rush in 1849. The United States has the chief things of the ancient mountain. They're here is a map of the historical gold location in North America, and it's quite extensive. Also, in the chief precious things of the lasting hills in the Appalachian Mountains in the East Coast came the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States. It's a pretty important thing. Another thing in verse 12, it says, "Their soul shall be as a watered garden." And here's a map from Department of Energy showing there's very little lowest amount of rainwater in the Rocky Mountain regions in Utah and Idaho and Arizona. But yet, in the next few slides, there were prophecies in Isaiah and other books that the wilderness and the solitary place shall be glad for them, and the desert shall rejoice and blossom as a rose. One of the significant things is they learned about irrigation. And irrigation is what settled the West, and the Latter-day Saint pioneers, their faith showed that it was possible. And the Mormon Battalion learned about irrigation and going through southern Arizona, and brought that to the Latter-day Saint settlement. And that technology and understanding spread throughout the West, and there are rose fields. This is a picture of rose field in Wasco, California, just miles and miles of it. It's just absolutely amazing. And here's a quote from Samuel Clemens, better known as Mark Twain, when he passed through Salt Lake City in 1861, and he wrote about it in his 1872 book, Roughing It. He marveled at the tidy, orderly city, and his description of Salt Lake City was quite idyllic, due in large part to water. He wrote, quote, "We strolled about everywhere through the broad, straight, level street. No visible drunkards or noisy people. A limpid stream rippling and dancing through every street in place of a filthy gutter. Block after block of trim dwellings, branches from stream winding and sparkling among the garden beds and fruit trees." In Isaiah 43:20 it says, "I give waters in the wilderness and rivers in the desert to give drink to my people, my chosen." And so here's a picture of a canal in St. George. There were aqueducts and irrigation, rivers in the desert. "I will open rivers in high places and fountains in the midst of the valleys. I will make the wilderness a pool of water and the dry land spring of water. And what's amazing is they built dams all through the Rocky Mountain region to capture the runoffs and the reservoirs high in the mountain, open rivers in high places. And here's a picture of Pine View Dam. You can kind of see that dam built lakes and provide ongoing water through the year in the valleys of Utah. And this is a picture of Pine View Dam, Ogden, Utah. In 1847, July 24th, Brigham Young approached the valley and lifted up from his sickbed and said, "This is the right place, drive on." Isaiah prophesied, and he said in his promise, "He shall set up an ensign for the nation, and shall assemble the outcast of Israel, and gather together the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth." In July 26th, a couple of days later, at Ensign Peak, a banner was waved, lifting an ensign for the nation. And missionaries, many missionaries, have gone from the Salt Lake Valley out to the world. In Jeremiah 31, verse 12 through 13, Jeremiah goes on to say, "Therefore they shall come and sing in the height of Zion, and shall flow together to the goodness of the Lord for wheat and for wine and for oil, and for the young of the flock and of the herd. And their souls shall be as a watered garden, and they shall not sorrow any more at all. Then shall the virgin rejoice in the dance, both young men and old together, for I will turn their mourning into joy, and will comfort them, and will make them rejoice from their sorrow." Here's a picture of the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. There's a lot of singing in the height of Zion. That's been going on for quite a long time. And then whenever they dedicate a temple, the youth gather together and they rejoice in a dance. They're singing and dancing, and both the young men and old men rejoice together. They will rejoice in their sorrow. In Jeremiah 31, 8 through 14, in verse 14, it says, "And I will satiate the soul of the priest with fatness, and my people shall be satisfied with my goodness, saith the Lord." And I just, over my membership, I'm amazed at the gratitude that missionaries and mission presidents have and for their service, and they express love for their missionaries. And bishops express gratitude for their service for many years, and the missionaries who come home express gratitude for serving. The prophecy of Jeremiah is right. "I will satiate the soul with fatness. My people shall be satisfied with my goodness." And then in verse 16, it says, "The blessings will come upon the head of Joseph, and upon the top of the head of him that was separated from his brethren." And the sons of Joseph were Ephraim and Manasseh, and they were blessed by Jacob. And also upon the head of him that was separated from his brethren, the children of Lehi. And there are other prophecies, like in Isaiah 5:28, "Their horse hooves be counted like flint, and their wheels like a whirlwind." That sounds like a good description of the railroad. And the last rail in the Union Pacific connecting the East and West occurred in Utah. And so Jeremiah goes on to say in verse 16, "The Lord liveth that brought up the children of Israel out of the land of Egypt." But they will say, "The Lord liveth that brought up the children of Israel from the land of the north, and from all the land whither he had driven them." LeGrand Richards said, "Just contemplate that statement for a few moments. Think how the Jews and the Christians all through these past centuries have praised the Lord for his great hand of deliverance under the hands of Moses, which when he led Israel out of captivity. And yet here comes Jeremiah with this word of the holy prophet, telling us that in the latter days they shall no more remember that, but how God has scattered Israel from the land whither he had driven them." And so how are we blessed by this? How am I blessed by this? One of the great blessings of the restoration of the gospel and of the gathering of the saints to the great Salt Lake was the building of the Salt Lake Temple. Isaiah 2:3, "Come ye, and let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, and he will teach of his ways, and we will walk in his path. For out of Zion shall go forth the law and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. LeGrand Richards said, how literally that has been fulfilled in my way of thinking, in this very house of the God of Jacob, right here on this block. This temple, more than any other building of which we have any record, has brought people from every land to learn of his ways and walk in his paths. I could tell you many stories about the great sacrifices our early pioneers and converts have made when they would sell everything that they had in this world and leave behind their loved ones and their friends and their occupation to come to a faraway land and learn a strange language. What brought them here? The house of the God of Jacob, that they might learn of his ways and walk in his paths. In Deuteronomy 33, verse 17, his glory is like the firstling of the bullock, and his horns are like the horns of unicorn. With them he shall push the people together to the ends of the earth, and they are the 10,000s of Ephraim, and they are the thousands of Manasseh. The missionaries go around the world in helping and gathering Israel. The building of temples also help with the gathering of Israel. There is an ongoing gathering of Israel on both sides of the veil, and that began with the gathering of the saints to the Great Salt Lake. In Joel chapter 2:28, and it shall come to pass afterward that I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, your old men shall dream dreams, your young men shall see visions. Of the prophet Joseph Smith's first vision, President Howard W. Hunter has said, as we think of the promise that young men shall see visions in the latter days, we are reminded of the vision that came to a youth only 14 years of age, which commenced the chain of events resulting in the restoration of the gospel of Jesus Christ in its fullness in the preceding century. The will of God was revealed, and a youth saw the vision. There are other ways of understanding this. One is your young men shall see vision. The technology that enables us to see the general conference and church videos and the life of Christ and of the restoration of the gospel is just amazing. And also, Joel said he would pour out my spirit upon all flesh. President Joseph Fielding Smith explained how the Lord would pour out his spirit upon all flesh. The inspiration which was promised to all flesh by the Lord through the prophecy of Joel is not the promise of the Holy Ghost, but the promise of the guidance of the light of Christ, or the Spirit of truth, which is given to every man who comes into the world. There has never been a step taken in a discovery or invention where the Spirit of the Lord was not the prevailing force, resting upon the individual, which caused him to make the discovery or invention. Then what? I think some action items I would suggest is gratitude, religious liberty, and family history, and be a pioneer. We should have gratitude in Doctrine and Covenants, the Lord revealed, and he who receiveth all things with thankfulness shall be made glorious, and the things of this earth shall be added unto him, even an hundredfold, yea more. And then I think what the pioneers did was absolutely of great faith. And the Lord said, for I, the Lord, have put forth my hand to exert the powers of heaven. You cannot see it now, yet a little while, and ye shall see it, and know that I am. It's interesting to look back and can see the fulfillment of prophecy of those pioneers. One important principle I think we should learn from the pioneers on July 24th is to know the persecution of the Latter-day Saints. We should feel sympathy, compassion, and help for others who are persecuted and displaced. We should also learn from the Latter-day Saints that we don't seek revenge or reparation, but remain firm in faith and hope and charity as we build our lives and try to build unity and harmony. We should be firm in protecting free speech and religious liberty. Part of the ongoing restoration of the gospel, Moroni told Joseph Smith that the hearts of the children shall turn to the fathers. One of the ways we can do that is be a pioneer. Share and record our family stories, whether our ancestors were pioneers that went west to the Great Salt Lake or not. Our ancestors have been pioneers in breaking ground, and they're the reason why we are where we are. The spiritual journeys of today require no less hope or faith than those of the early pioneers. We ourselves can be pioneers. Our challenges may be different, but the struggles are just as great. And as we turn our heart to our fathers, we can do that temple work. And that temple work was made possible by the restoration of the gospel and the pioneers who helped establish that foundation. There's some great website to learn and go out and seek and look at the historical places, and if you have that opportunity to go and see them or look online and look at those historic sites and be realize the faith and have gratitude for the sacrifices that they have made. If you wonder if you have ancestors that were if you have pioneer relatives, a good place to look is BYU's Relative Finder. Click on this link and it'll link to your family search. It does assume you have some family search, but it'll search through what you have and see if you have ancestors that were pioneers. And that's amazing to find that out. And then there's other historical sites. There's a Mormon Pioneer National Historic Trail, and they have stops along the way. Some of the places to go and see, and that's a National Park Service. And another thing that can be done is to reenact some of the stories of your ancestors or of the pioneers. Here's the family kind of role playing in a hand cart that sometimes churches have in different places. And then just a bonus link, there's Exodus Repeated. This is a talk given by Russell M. Nelson. It's a classic, and it compares the gathering of Israel in modern day to what happened in the Exodus anciently. He compared Joseph, who was sold into Egypt, to Joseph Smith and Moses. And he compared Brigham Young to Moses, and some of the experiences that the Latter-day Saints experience is similar to what was experienced in Exodus. Another great talk was by Hugh Nibley, Time Vindicates the Prophets, and he kind of gives a historical comparison, and it's really quite striking, the similarities between the Latter-day Saint pioneers who gathered west to historical events.